What happens when one of Hollywood's most direct actors sits down with a late-night host who isn't ready for unfiltered honesty? The result: a clash so unexpected that network executives were forced to intervene, leaving viewers shocked and sparking intense debate across social media. What was meant to be a routine promotional appearance turned into a moment that exposed the carefully controlled world of late-night TV. The night Mark Wahlberg appeared on The Late Show was supposed to be just another segment to promote his latest movie. Instead, audiences watched a steadily escalating exchange that ended with Wahlberg being quietly removed from the set during a commercial break, never returning for the second half of the show. Before diving into what triggered this heated moment between Mark Wahlberg and Stephen Colbert, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. This story uncovers a side of late-night television that the networks rarely show. Leave a comment if you've ever noticed the cracks forming in the polished surface of celebrity interviews. The evening started as expected. The crowd applauded as Mark Wahlberg was introduced, striding onto the stage with his usual confident energy. He greeted Colbert with a handshake and took his seat. The conversation opened with familiar topics: his latest film and a few light-hearted remarks about his famously intense fitness regimen. "So Mark, I hear you wake up at 4:30 every morning to work out," Colbert said, leaning in with his signature smirk, often a lead-in to a playful jab. "Yeah, I do," Wahlberg responded earnestly. "Discipline matters to me. It's how I've stayed consistent in this business." That's when the tone subtly began to shift. Instead of moving forward, Colbert lingered, exaggerating his facial expressions to draw laughs. "Come on, no one needs to be up that early unless they're delivering newspapers or milking cows," he joked, expecting laughter. "Isn't that a bit much?" Wahlberg, known for being candid, didn't play along. "Look, Stephen, I get that everyone has their own way of doing things, but this works for me. My career's been built on routine and hard work." The camera caught a brief flicker of irritation on Colbert's face. It wasn't the first time he'd seemed frustrated by a guest who didn't follow his usual rhythm. But what happened next took even loyal viewers by surprise. As Wahlberg discussed his new film, he touched on how the character resonated with his working-class upbringing in Boston. "I always remember where I came from. That kind of authenticity guides the roles I take on," Colbert interrupted. "Sure, but in today's political climate, don't you think it's problematic to keep glorifying the working-class background, especially when your life now looks very different?" The audience fell noticeably silent. This wasn't the casual segment they had expected. Wahlberg shifted in his seat, caught off guard. "I'm not sure I follow," he replied, his Boston accent becoming more pronounced, a sign he was uneasy. "There's nothing political about honoring hard work or remembering your roots." What happened next was a rare unscripted moment of tension on national television. Instead of returning to a lighter topic, Colbert pressed on. "Some might argue it's convenient to claim working-class credibility while living in a multi-million-dollar home," he said, his smile thinning, "especially when many of your fans are facing real financial struggles." The camera briefly cut to the audience. Confusion had replaced the usual smiles. This wasn't the light-hearted exchange viewers typically expect from The Late Show. Wahlberg's reply followed a clear moment of tension. "Stephen, I'm here to talk about my new film, not to be lectured on politics or have my integrity questioned. I've earned everything through hard work and never claimed to be someone I'm not." Just off camera, Colbert's producer could be seen signaling urgently, gestures the host either didn't notice or deliberately ignored. Instead, Colbert leaned in, his tone shifting from light humor to pointed critique. "But don't you think public figures have a duty to acknowledge their privilege, especially when they're presenting an image that no longer reflects their current lifestyle?" The energy in the room changed instantly. Where there's usually laughter or applause, there was only silence. Wahlberg, to his credit, kept his cool, though the tightening of his jaw was clear to viewers. "I think public figures should be honest," Wahlberg said calmly. "And honestly, Stephen, I'm starting to feel like I was invited here under false pretenses. If you wanted a political debate, maybe you should have brought on a politician." The tension was approaching a breaking point. Just as Colbert began to respond, the network abruptly cut to a commercial, slightly earlier than planned, according to insiders who later spoke with entertainment reporters. When the show returned, viewers were surprised to see Colbert seated alone, with no mention of Wahlberg's disappearance. The host moved on to the next segment as if nothing had happened, but by then the fallout had already begun. Social media lit up with questions, viewers asking what had unfolded during the commercial break. According to staff present that evening, the argument continued off camera. Raised voices could be heard, and producers quickly decided to pull Wahlberg from the remainder of the taping to avoid further confrontation. What occurred behind the scenes during that break revealed a stark contrast between Colbert's on-screen persona and his real reaction under pressure. As soon as the cameras stopped rolling, Colbert removed his microphone, stood up, and directly confronted Wahlberg. "What do you think you're doing?" he asked, his carefully crafted public demeanor slipping away. "This is my show. You don't get to come on and tell me how to do my job." Wahlberg, who had remained seated until that point, stood, towering over the host. "I came here to promote a film, not to be made into a political target," he replied, voice firm but controlled. "Where I come from, guests are treated with respect." Several crew members witnessed the exchange. One production assistant was heard whispering, "I've never seen him like this." Colbert continued, pointing a finger toward Wahlberg. "You know what your problem is, Mark. You act like your working-class background gives you special insight, but you've been wealthy and famous for years. You're just as disconnected as anyone in Hollywood." Wahlberg's jaw tensed again, but his response was composed. "And you think hiding behind humor gives you the right to corner your guests? I've always been upfront in my career. Can you honestly say the same?" At this point, network executives were called to the set. They found the two men in a standoff. The senior producer quietly approached Colbert, speaking in hushed tones while glancing over at Wahlberg. "We need to keep the show moving," the producer urged. "There are still 2 more segments, and another guest waiting." "I'm not going back out there with him," Colbert said loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "Either he goes, or I go." The ultimatum hung in the air. The producer glanced helplessly between host and guest. This was unfamiliar ground for a show known for its smooth, controlled atmosphere. "Are you serious?" Wahlberg asked, clearly surprised. "You're kicking me off the show because I didn't let you talk down to me." Colbert turned to face him directly. "This isn't a movie set where you call the shots. This is my show, and on my show we follow my rules." At that point, the senior executive producer intervened, making a decision that would later be widely discussed across the entertainment industry. "Mark, I think it's best if we reschedule your appearance for another time, when things are a little calmer." Wahlberg looked from Colbert to the executive, realizing what was happening. "So that's it. He loses his temper, and I'm the one being asked to leave." "It's not personal," the executive began. "Everything about this is personal," Wahlberg interrupted, removing his microphone. "This was set up from the beginning. The questions weren't about my film. They were meant to put me on the defensive." As security staff approached to guide him out, Wahlberg raised a hand. "That's not necessary. I can find my own way." The atmosphere remained tense as Wahlberg collected his belongings. Before leaving, he turned to Colbert one last time. "You know what separates us, Stephen? I play roles for a living, but off camera, I'm always myself. Can you honestly say the same?" Colbert's face reddened, but he said nothing. Wahlberg turned and walked toward the exit. The production team stood still, unsure what to do next. A production assistant quietly approached Wahlberg to return a few personal items. "For what it's worth," she whispered, "this isn't the first time something like this has happened." Wahlberg gave a slight nod, "And probably not the last." Meanwhile, Colbert met with his writers, quickly adjusting the remainder of the show. "No mention of this when we're back on," he instructed. "Move the musical guest up. I'll extend the monologue for the second half." Back in the studio, the audience, still unaware of what had just happened, waited for the show to resume. In the green room, the next guest, a well-known actress there to promote her latest movie, watched the monitor with concern. "Is everything all right?" she asked a passing crew member. That interview felt tense. "Just a last-minute change," came the practiced reply. Mr. Wahlberg had to leave unexpectedly. On stage, the floor manager counted down. Colbert took a breath, adjusted his tie, and smiled. The anger from earlier was no longer visible. "We're back in 5, 4, 3. The manager silently signaled 2-1 and pointed to Colbert. "Welcome back," Colbert said smoothly, his tone calm and professional. "Unfortunately, Mark Wahlberg had to leave early. But we've got a great show ahead." A few audience members exchanged puzzled looks, clearly aware something had happened. But the show continued. An example of the tightly managed image that defines network television. Outside the studio, Wahlberg declined to comment to the waiting paparazzi. "Watch the show," he said. "It speaks for itself." He climbed into his waiting SUV, already on a call with his publicist. Inside, the next segment was already underway. During the commercial break, Colbert's composure slipped again as he turned his frustration toward his team. "Who approved him?" he asked sharply. "Did anyone check what he planned to talk about?" We looked completely unprepared. A junior producer spoke up cautiously. "Sir, we did provide the standard prep questions, but Mr. Wahlberg's team was told this would be a routine promotional interview for his film." "Routine doesn't mean easy," Colbert snapped back. "We have a responsibility to push back, even when it's just about a movie." The producer nodded, already regretting the comment. Colbert locked eyes with him. "Especially then. No one gets a free pass just because they're promoting something." Elsewhere, a staff writer leaned toward a colleague and whispered, "Interesting how that rule only applies to certain guests." As the next segment began, the mood on set stayed uneasy. Team members exchanged glances, aware they had just witnessed something significant. One camera operator mouthed to another, "This is going to get out." And it did. By morning, audience members were already posting their observations on social media. "Strangest thing I've ever seen at a live taping," one user wrote. "Wahlberg was there one moment, then suddenly gone. Colbert acted like nothing happened, but you could feel something was off." Backstage reports confirmed Colbert remained visibly irritated for the rest of the taping, scolding staff over minor mistakes and insisting the subject not be brought up. "If anyone talks to the press about this, they're out," he reportedly said, during the final commercial break. But the story had already taken on a life of its own. Audience members who'd witnessed the tense exchange were beginning to piece together what had likely happened during the break. Entertainment reporters caught wind of it quickly, calling sources and exchanging texts with insiders. The actual broadcast never revealed Wahlberg's departure, but behind-the-scenes accounts filled in the blanks. Rather than leaving immediately, Wahlberg had made his way to Colbert's dressing room, where the host had gone following their on-stage confrontation. "We need to talk," Wahlberg said, knocking on the door. Man to man, off camera. Inside, Colbert was meeting with his executive producer and lead writer, figuring out how to manage the rest of the show. The knock disrupted the conversation. "Mr. Colbert isn't available right now," the executive producer called through the door. "I didn't ask to speak with you," Wahlberg responded calmly. "Steven and I need to settle this, and I'm not leaving until we do." After a pause, Colbert opened the door himself. "5 minutes," he said shortly. "Just us," he added to his staff, who reluctantly stepped out of the room. With the door closed behind them, the real conversation began. "What was that out there?" Wahlberg asked, motioning back toward the stage. "I came here to discuss a film I spent 2 years working on, and you tried to spin it into a political stunt." Colbert folded his arms. "This show isn't just for promotion. We cover real issues here." Wahlberg raised an eyebrow. "Real issues? You mean calling me out for remembering where I came from? That's not a real issue. That's just scoring points at my expense." Colbert's face reddened. "You celebrities expect an easy ride just because you show up." "No," Wahlberg replied firmly. "I expected the interview your producers outlined when they booked me. They said it would be about the film. If you wanted to go in another direction, you should have said so up front." The tension in the room was undeniable, as Colbert walked to his desk and sat down, using the furniture to create distance. A subtle boundary had formed between them, an unspoken move by Colbert to reassert the control he'd lost during the earlier exchange on set. "My audience expects me to ask the tough questions," Colbert said, adopting the slightly condescending tone he often used with guests who challenged him. "No," Wahlberg replied, remaining on his feet. "Your audience expects you to be entertaining." The moment you decided I needed a lesson instead of a conversation, you stopped being a host and started acting like a prosecutor. Colbert's jaw tightened. You really don't get it, do you? This show has a point of view. We're not just here to help sell tickets. And you don't get that most people don't tune in for your opinions. Wahlberg shot back. They tune in for some fun, to hear celebrities talk about their projects, maybe laugh a bit, not to watch you call out anyone who doesn't match your politics. A knock at the door broke the tension. The stage manager's voice followed, "Mr. Colbert, we're back on set in 3 minutes." Colbert stood up, clearly relieved. "We're done here." "Yeah, we are," Wahlberg agreed. "But let me leave you with this. I came from nothing, worked for everything, and I've never lost touch with that. Can you say the same? Or have you been in this media bubble so long that you've forgotten how to speak with people who don't think like you?" The question lingered in the silence that followed. For a brief moment, something shifted in Colbert's expression, perhaps a flash of realization, but then his face hardened. "My audience knows exactly what I'm doing," he replied. "Your audience might," Wahlberg conceded. "But what about everyone else? You used to be the kind of comedian who could connect with anyone. Now you're just preaching to your base." Before Colbert could answer, his executive producer opened the door. "We have to go." Wahlberg turned to leave. "Good luck with the rest of your show. Sounds like you'll need it." As he walked down the hallway toward the exit, Wahlberg passed the green room. Inside, the next guest, a young actress promoting her first major film, sat nervously going over her note cards. "Is everything all right out there?" she asked, sensing the tension that had settled over the studio. "Just a few creative differences," Wahlberg said with a calm smile. "Word of advice, stick to talking about your movie." She nodded, visibly more uneasy than before. Meanwhile, back on set, Colbert was being readied to return from the commercial break. A makeup artist blotted the sweat from his forehead, caused either by the studio lights or the recent confrontation. "How are we handling this?" his producer asked in a low voice. "We're not," Colbert replied firmly. "No reference to it. Move the musical guest up. I'll stretch the monologue for the second half." The audience saw what happened, the producer reminded him. "They'll be confused if we pretend it didn't." "Let them be confused," Colbert said. "It's my show. I decide how we shape what goes out." As the floor director counted down, Colbert adjusted his tie and reset his smile. The polished persona returned, as though nothing unusual had occurred. "Welcome back to The Late Show," he said smoothly, as the cameras rolled. "Unfortunately, Mark Wahlberg had to leave, but we've still got a great show ahead." Even over the applause sign, murmurs of confusion could be heard throughout the crowd. Several audience members exchanged looks, clearly aware that something had happened. In the control room, the director turned to the executive producer. "We're seriously not going to acknowledge any of that. Boss's orders," the producer replied. "We move forward as if nothing happened." The audience wasn't quick to move on. As Colbert attempted to shift into the next segment, the energy in the room had clearly changed. Laughter sounded more reserved, and applause lacked its usual enthusiasm. The unspoken agreement between host and viewers, built on trust and transparency, had been disrupted. Meanwhile, Wahlberg had already exited the building, offering no comment to the paparazzi gathered outside. His only remark: "Watch the show, it speaks for itself." As his car pulled away, his phone rang. It was longtime friend and fellow actor, Dwayne Johnson. "Just got a message about what went down," Johnson said when Wahlberg picked up. "You all right?" "Yeah," Wahlberg replied, glancing back at the shrinking studio. "Just reminded why I usually focus on the work." "Let me guess," Johnson said. "Another host who thinks their job is to interrogate you, instead of having a conversation." "Something like that," Wahlberg confirmed. "The thing is, I would have gladly had a real discussion about privilege and class, if he'd been up front, but that wasn't the goal. He was looking for a gotcha moment, and when he didn't get it, he didn't know how to react." Back at the studio, the rest of the show carried on, but something felt off. Colbert's jokes didn't quite land, and his interaction with the musical guest felt overly cheerful, as if he were trying to make up for the lingering discomfort in the room. During the last commercial break, Colbert pulled his head writer aside. "We're going to have to address this tomorrow," he admitted. "Social media's already going crazy. What's our approach?" the writer asked. "Do we apologize, make light of it, or stand our ground?" Colbert paused before responding. "We spin it as a misunderstanding, say timing forced us to cut the interview short. Nothing about what happened off camera." "You think that'll work?" the writer asked, unconvinced. "A lot of people in the audience saw how it played out. They know it wasn't just a timing issue." "It has to work," Colbert said, his voice tightening slightly, "because the alternative is admitting I lost control of my own show." As the final segment wrapped and the audience started leaving, their conversations reflected the real story. "Did you catch Wahlberg's reaction when Colbert started lecturing him?" one audience member asked. "I've never seen anything like that on a late-night show," another replied. "The weirdest part was how they just came back from break and acted like nothing happened, like we were supposed to forget what we just watched." That night, the contrast between the two men's responses was telling. Wahlberg moved on, focusing on his family and upcoming promotional events. Colbert, on the other hand, stayed up scrolling through online reactions, becoming more irritated as public opinion took shape. The reality was, both had shown their true selves in that unscripted exchange. Wahlberg came across just as he claimed, direct, grounded, and not easily rattled. Colbert, whether he intended to or not, confirmed a suspicion held by some, that behind the warm open-minded facade, was someone far less receptive to perspectives that didn't align with his own. Ultimately, their clash highlighted a key tension in today's entertainment world: the gap between projecting authenticity and actually being authentic. In an industry centered on curated images, this moment offered a rare look behind the performance. What happens when the script is set aside and real personalities come through? That, perhaps, is why this incident struck such a chord with viewers. In a media world often filled with scripted drama and manufactured outrage, the genuine nature of this exchange stood out. It felt like an unscripted moment of honesty, something rarely seen. If you found this breakdown of the Wahlberg-Colbert exchange insightful, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our in-depth looks at Hollywood's most talked about moments. Now we want to hear from you. Was Colbert justified in challenging Wahlberg, or did he go too far by catching his guest off guard? Share your thoughts in the comments below.